As I passed by his room, I overheard his conversation with a friend. You really don't like Chloe? Then why do you care so much about her? She's sickly. My mom insists I look after her. It's so annoying. I'm here to study, not be a caregiver. The next day, I applied for dorm housing at school, packed my bags, and moved out of the Zhong residence. I was born prematurely and spent 3 months in the ICU right after birth. But aside from having weaker immunity since childhood and occasionally being a bit slower to react, I feel no different from anyone else. Yet my parents remain overly anxious about me. The slightest bump or scrape sends them rushing to take me for a full-body checkup at the hospital. When I got into university in Xiqing, far from home, I finally escaped my parents' control. But Mom specifically reached out to her friend in Xiqing, Aunt Li. Aunt Li lived near campus. Upon learning I attended the same university as her son, Colin Zhong, she immediately offered me a place to stay. My parents agreed without even asking my opinion. Aunt Li and her husband were also my parents' university classmates. Years ago, Aunt Li's husband had failed in business and accumulated massive debts. My parents had practically emptied their savings to help the Li family escape those debts. Aunt Li knew about my condition. My mom told me that when I was in the ICU, Aunt Li had even rushed all the way to North City to see me. So, just when I'd finally escaped my parents' supervision, Aunt Li stepped in to oversee me. Unfortunately, I've always been a pushover and couldn't say no, so I ended up moving into Auntie Li's house. My arrival actually caused quite a few inconveniences for Auntie Li's son, Colin. For instance, his gaming room was turned into my bedroom. For instance, the bathroom he used to have all to himself now had another girl's things in it. For instance, sometimes when I had more afternoon classes, he had to wait for me to finish before we could go home together. Colin was like the male lead archetype from the romance novels I read in high school. Standing 193 centimeters tall, he favored white t-shirts and was an exceptional basketball player. With stellar grades, a handsome, aloof appearance, and a smile that warmed hearts like spring sunshine, he was the most captivating presence on campus. So, inevitably, as our days and nights intertwined, I found myself secretly falling for him. Colin got his driver's license as soon as he turned 16. He drove to and from school every day, often giving me a ride. At first, I felt awkward getting into the car under the hostile stares of other girls, but later I grew accustomed to it, even secretly delighted. Though proximity offered advantages, my timid nature made it hard for me to take the initiative. The only time I could be alone with Colin at home was when I brought him fruit after meals. After dinner each day, I'd help Auntie Li clear the dishes while she washed the fruit. Chloe, take this plate to Colin for me. Auntie Li pushed a dish of fruit toward me before carrying another plate to the living room. Come down and eat after you deliver it. The cherries I bought today are so fresh. I nodded and carried the fruit upstairs. Arriving at Colin's door, I knocked twice with no response. Was he gaming? Just as I hesitated over knocking louder, the bathroom door opened nearby. A wave of steam spilled into the hallway as Colin emerged, towel drying his hair. What a sight, a handsome man emerging from his bath. In the moment I stared, distracted, he had already stepped before me and took the fruit plate from my hands. The scent of shower gel wafted toward me. And we used the same brand. My cheeks flushed hot, and I nervously let the strand of hair tucked behind my ear fall forward. Is there something else? No. I turned to head downstairs, but he called out to me. Well, Starting tomorrow, I'll be busy with lab work at school. You'll have to go home on your own in the evenings. I agreed readily, though my heart sank. The next day after class, I hurriedly packed my things and dashed to the school parking lot. Colin's car sat quietly there, but he was nowhere to be seen. Only then did I remember, today I was supposed to go home alone. So I turned and headed toward the school gate. Passing the intersection leading to Colin's building, I glanced in his direction. As luck would have it, I saw him emerge from the corner, arms full of papers, a faint smile on his lips. Beside him was a girl with an elegant bearing, her waist-length hair tied in a low ponytail that softened her features. They chatted and laughed as they entered the building, slowly disappearing from view. When I'm unhappy, I have a habit of biting my lip, the pain helps snap me back to reality. I drifted slowly toward the school exit, lost in thought, when a girl stepped out and blocked my path. Excuse me, are you Colin's sister? Could you please give me his contact information? From the start, I'd always said our parents were friends and I was just staying with his family. Somehow, through word of mouth, it had morphed into me being his cousin, niece, or some other kind of relative. No. Sorry, I'm not his sister, and I'm not really in a position to give out his contact info. I blurted it out in one breath, clutching my bag strapped tightly as I brushed past the girl. This was the first time I'd ever turned down one of his admirers, and one of the few times I'd ever turned anyone down in my life. I quickened my pace, too nervous to look back and see if she was following. My head felt hot, my heart pounding. Like a headless fly, I collided head-on with a bicycle. My ankle twisted, my palms scraped raw, and only then did I come to my senses. Are you okay? The cyclist and nearby classmates rushed to help me up. Gritting my teeth against the pain in my ankle, I felt awkward surrounded by so many people. The cyclist insisted on driving me home. Desperate to escape the crowd, I reluctantly got into his car. When we stopped in front of Colin's villa, he exclaimed in surprise, "This is Colin's house." Auntie Lee happened to be coming out to water the flowers. Seeing me hobble down from the bike, she hurried over, exclaiming, "Oh dear," as she helped me up. Turns out the boy who hit me was Oscar. He and Colin had been best friends since high school and now attended the same university as us. Because of my injury, Colin got an unexpected scolding from Auntie Lee when he got home. He arrived home past 10 p.m., looking exhausted. After a few words from Auntie Lee, he irritably flung his shirt over his shoulder and stormed upstairs. That boy! Seeing Colin's attitude, Auntie Lee tried to follow him upstairs to scold him further. I quickly pulled Aunt Lee back. "Auntie, their lab's been crazy busy lately. He got home so late, who knows if he even ate. Besides, I'm an adult now, I don't need someone driving me to and from school every day." Hearing my words, Aunt Lee's face showed both resignation and concern. She finally softened her tone. "Well, I'll go make him a late-night snack. Could you help me bring it up to him later?" "Sure thing." Because of my injured foot, Colin was forced to drive me to school every day. After dropping me off, he'd head back to campus to handle lab work. I felt terribly guilty for taking up his time and refused several times. Colin stared out the window, tapping his index finger impatiently on the steering wheel. "Stop dawdling. Get in the car." A week later, my foot finally healed. At dinner, I suggested taking public transportation to and from school on my own. Aunt Lee initially disagreed, but after my persistent persuasion, she finally agreed. Colin glanced at me without comment, but I could tell he was in a good mood. But life is unpredictable. Just a few days into my new routine of taking the bus, I actually encountered a taxi crashing into a bus. It was after school, and the bus was crowded, all the seats were taken. I stood beside a row of seats, holding onto the handles on the back of the chairs. Suddenly, a taxi slammed into the bus from the side. The powerful impact knocked nearly everyone standing to the floor. I was thrown from the left side of the bus to the right, crashing into the door. In that moment, it felt like my whole body was shattering. The injured passengers moaned in pain. I struggled to lift myself halfway up, leaning against a pillar. Fortunately, the ambulance arrived before I lost consciousness. Since I was closest to the door, I was the first to be carried onto a stretcher. Once inside the ambulance, my mind grew increasingly hazy until I passed out. When I woke up, I was in a hospital room filled with the smell of disinfectant. Auntie Lee, Uncle Zhong, and Colin were all in my room. I shifted slightly and felt bandages wrapped around my head and feet, with a neck brace secured around my neck. "Chloe, you're awake? Do you remember who I am?" I nodded with effort. "I'll go get the doctor," Colin said before hurrying out of the room. Auntie Lee quickly pulled out her phone to call my parents and update them, while Uncle Zhong stayed by my side, asking if I felt any discomfort. Soon after, Colin returned with the doctor. After examining me, the doctor explained I had suffered a mild concussion from the blow to my head, along with various injuries across my body. I needed to rest in bed for 2 weeks before a follow-up check. After the doctor left, Aunt Lee called my parents again, filled with guilt, and explained the situation in detail. After hanging up, she told me my parents would be coming to West City soon. I thought that was probably for the best, it would spare Aunt Lee the trouble of looking after me every day. After the call, Aunt Lee turned and scolded Colin again, saying that if he'd driven me home, none of this would have happened. Colin held back his anger until he could no longer contain it. Grabbing his bag, he stood up from the sofa. Even if I had driven her home, I would have taken the same route. That damn taxi could have hit me too. You'd only be satisfied if we both got into an accident, wouldn't you? With that, he stormed out of the hospital room without looking back. Furious at being talked back to, Auntie Lee tried to chase after him. I instinctively tried to get out of bed to hold her back, but a sharp pain in my arm sent me crashing back down. Thankfully, Uncle Zhong grabbed her arm. It was an accident. Who could have known that taxi driver would suddenly lose control after arguing with a passenger? Why are you blaming my son? That's right, Auntie Lee. This is entirely the taxi driver's fault. He injured so many passengers, no one could have predicted this. Auntie Lee realized she'd wrongly taken her anger out on Colin. She said no more, silently picking up the porridge that had cooled on the bedside table and feeding me spoonful by spoonful. Auntie Lee had planned to stay overnight to care for me, but I insisted on spending the night in the hospital myself. She had arranged for a private room and hired a 24-hour private nurse. The room was furnished like a hotel, offering a hint of warmth amidst the lingering scent of disinfectant. Yet that first night in the room was particularly grueling. Not only was I a restless sleeper, but I couldn't turn over, and my back was itching. Calling the private nurse over for such a minor issue felt like overreacting, so I silently rubbed against the sheets instead. Suddenly, the door opened a crack. Thinking it was the nurse coming to check on me, I felt saved. Instead, it was Colin. Why are you here? He stood in the doorway and asked, "May I come in?" Machem, he opened the door, leaving it ajar. The light spilling in from the hallway made him look like a god stepping out of the glow. He didn't turn on the light, walking straight to my bedside. Only then did I notice what he was holding. It was my pillow. This. He awkwardly wiped his nose. When you first moved in, I saw you bought this pillow specially. Figured you might sleep better with your own. He leaned down, gently cradling the back of my head. He pulled out the original pillow and tossed it aside, replacing it with my own. My pillow was designed to contour to my neck, but with the neck brace still on, it didn't feel much better. Colin, who had finished arranging the pillow, clearly noticed this too and seemed momentarily awkward. "Thanks," I murmured. Maybe it was the nervousness, or maybe because my mouth was hidden under the covers, my voice sounded muffled. "And sorry for getting you yelled at for no reason." Colin shrugged indifferently. "I'm used to it." Another wave of itchiness washed over my back, making me shiver involuntarily. Colin noticed and touched my blanket. "Are you cold?" My face flushed, and I shook my head. He suddenly looked awkward. "Need to use the bathroom?" "No." My hands clenched sweatily beneath the covers. Under Colin's questioning gaze, I finally relented. My back is itchy." My voice trailed off, wishing I could bury myself completely under the blankets. While I was still fidgeting, he didn't seem to think it was a big deal at all. He simply sat down on the chair beside the bed, rolled up the sleeve of his left arm with his right hand. Was he going to scratch my back? His hand slid gently between the sheets, his palm spread wide across my back. "Is this it?" A little lower. His large hand moved downward, and my spine felt like it was melting. Right there, his fingers lightly scratched, each stroke seeming to reach through my back and tickle my heart. My breathing grew increasingly difficult, and my face burned unbearably hot. "Still itchy?" Only then did he notice my face was bright red. Slowly, he seemed to realize his actions might be a bit inappropriate. His hand abruptly withdrew, leaving only the lingering warmth on my back. "Sorry for offending you." I forced a light-hearted tone. If I didn't seem awkward, neither would he. "It's fine. I feel much better now. It's getting late, you should head back soon." "Okay." He stood up and walked toward the ward door, closing it softly behind him. In the silent space, I could clearly hear my own heartbeat. The weather in Xicheng this year was particularly harsh. When school started, it was nearly 40 degrees Celsius every day. Now, just as autumn began, torrential rains had poured down for days, bringing a sudden cold snap. Colin's grandmother had also fallen ill unexpectedly, and Aunt Lee needed to return to visit her. My parents' flight was cancelled due to the weather. They tried switching to the high-speed rail, but tickets were sold out as National Day approached. Uncle Zhong was swamped at work and unavailable. Though a private caregiver was present, Auntie Lee insisted Colin visit me daily. So the next afternoon, Colin brought soup Auntie Lee had warmed in a pot that morning to my hospital room. But trailing behind him was another girl, the one seen walking with Colin at school last time. "This is my lab partner, Luna," Colin introduced briefly. "Just a lab partner?" I nodded at Luna. "Hello." Colin placed the soup on the bedside table and was about to open it when Luna stopped him. Let me pour it for my sister. You go wash the fruit you bought. Colin stepped aside, handing the fruit to Luna before heading to the ward bathroom to wash it. Luna sat beside my bed and poured the soup into a bowl for me. She was truly beautiful, with an elegant demeanor and a soft, gentle voice. But suddenly, a flicker of disdain crossed her face as she murmured to me, "Little sister, you really don't take care of yourself. Going to such lengths just so Colin can drive you to and from school every day, what?" I thought I'd misheard, but her expression confirmed I hadn't. I glanced toward the bathroom where the water ran steadily. She'd spoken softly, Colin couldn't possibly have heard. Twisting your ankle one day, getting into a car accident the next. I understand what girls like you think. But now you're affecting others. I couldn't understand why a girl I just met would look at me like that, much less why I deserved her unprovoked sarcasm. Angry and hurt, I still didn't know how to even begin explaining myself. Colin emerged with a bowl of washed fruit, slipping back into that gentle, charming persona. Colin placed the fruit on the small table and politely urged me to eat more fruit to replenish my nutrients. Colin, the professor is still waiting for us to return, Luna reminded softly. Okay, he replied, picking up his backpack. I'll head back to school to finish up work. I'll come see you again after I'm done. I nodded, said goodbye, and watched them leave with a complicated mix of emotions. That evening, Mom and Dad called to say they'd finally secured train tickets and would arrive in Xicheng the following afternoon. It was the happiest news I'd received in days. Though I'd often wished to escape them before, after months apart, I truly missed them. The next afternoon, Mom and Dad appeared in my hospital room carrying a pile of my favorite hometown delicacies. Seeing my pitiful state, Mom was the first to tear up. Dad stood silently beside her, his face dark as he studied the injuries on my body. His stern expression hid nothing but heartache. An extra bed was added to the ward, and my parents stayed with me at the hospital every day. Colin still came to visit me every afternoon, but Luna never came along again. Though Colin remained polite and proper around my parents, I still noticed his growing impatience. When my parents stepped out, I called him over. Colin. He'd been sitting on the sofa scrolling through his phone. At my voice, his hand dropped the phone to his lap. He didn't respond, just lifted his gaze slightly to meet mine, waiting for me to speak. The impatience was undeniable. My parents are here for the time being. If you're busy with school, you don't have to come over. Okay. He didn't bother with formalities, just grabbed his bag and stood up. I'll head out then. Watching him walk out of the ward without hesitation, the sudden silence felt a bit lonely. My heart felt a little sour and tingly. Things had been fine before, but ever since Luna came that day, his attitude toward me had suddenly turned impatient. What was his relationship with Luna? Did he like Luna, while Luna didn't like me? Did he, like Luna, think my injury was just a ploy to cling to him? Colin didn't come back for the next few days. I tentatively brought up several times that I wanted to apply to move back into the dorms. My parents were united in their stance, insisting I stay at Aunt Lee's place. They said the home-cooked meals were healthier than anything outside. Later, Aunt Lee returned from her hometown. The three of us spent every day catching up in my hospital room, filling the 2 weeks with lively chatter. Under my parents' attentive care, the doctor examined me and said I could go home to recover. Aunt Lee prepared a feast to celebrate my discharge. It was also on this day that I saw Colin again after nearly 2 weeks. The elders chattered nonstop at the table while the two of us sat at the far end, quietly eating our meals. Suddenly, Auntie Lee glanced my way and joked, "I've always wanted a daughter." My heart skipped a beat. Such remarks often carried hidden meanings. I looked up at Colin, his expression had stiffened too, a look of utter speechlessness. I gripped my chopsticks tightly, silently praying Auntie Lee would drop the subject. Chloe is so sweet and well-behaved. Why didn't our families arrange a betrothal back then? The moment Auntie Lee finished speaking, Colin set down his bowl and chopsticks, muttered a perfunctory "I'm done," and headed upstairs. Though his bowl was still half full, his attitude unmistakable. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw my dad looking grim, while Aunt Lee and my mom seemed awkward. Uncle Zhong stepped in to smooth things over. My son's got a terrible temper and is terribly sensitive. He's no match for our Chloe. Aunt Lee steered the conversation elsewhere, though Dad remained slightly unsettled. Everyone chatted and laughed, but my heart felt sour and bitter. After another week of recuperation at home, I could manage basic activities with caution. A follow-up scan at the hospital showed no major issues, so I was cleared to return to school. Mom and Dad headed back to the city, and I resumed riding with Colin to and from school. The car fell silent. Trying to break the awkwardness, I mentioned a popular movie everyone was talking about. Before I could finish, he reached over and cranked up the car stereo. A hip-hop track started playing, its beat filling the space until my voice was completely drowned out. I fell silent. The bass pounded against my eardrums. I turned to look out the window, biting my lower lip hard to hold back the tears. Why did he suddenly dislike me so much? After that, I rode with him in complete silence. Though the distance from school to home wasn't long, after a few days, I couldn't take it anymore. His attitude made me feel like my mere presence annoyed him. If that was the case, you don't need to drive me home anymore. If Aunt Lee asks, I'll say you dropped me off at the neighborhood entrance. Before he could respond, I got out of the car. He neither agreed nor refused. Only after I'd walked a distance did I hear the engine start and the car fade into the distance. And so, from that day on, we both kept this unspoken agreement. Every day he drove me to school, and after class I took the bus home by myself. Auntie Lee would ask at first if Colin had brought me back, but later stopped asking, assuming he always did. One day after class, the professor asked me to deliver some materials to a building near the East Gate. So, instead of taking my usual route off campus, I walked to the farthest gate from our department. This gate was a bit out of the way, but it led to a long row of ginkgo trees. November was the season when ginkgo leaves fell. Thick piles of fallen leaves lined the roadside. Several couples strolled along this path, and some people stopped to take pictures. I walked slowly behind one couple toward the bus stop. The girl and boy in front held hands tightly, her head resting lightly on his shoulder. He affectionately ruffled her hair, then gently kissed her forehead. The scene was truly lovely, if only the girl hadn't turned her head. She turned to speak with him, but when her peripheral vision caught sight of me, she instantly pulled away. The guy looked at her in confusion. Seeing her gaze fixed on me, both their eyes landed on me. That girl was Luna. But that guy wasn't Colin. Catching them like this made me feel a mix of secret delight and anger. Given Luna's hostility toward me last time, I assumed she liked Colin. And since Colin's attitude toward me changed abruptly after that hospital visit, I figured Luna must have said something to him, which is why he kept his distance. So I assumed Colin must like Luna too. But now Luna was being so intimate with another guy. If she had nothing to hide, why would she feel guilty and pull away from him when she saw me? We stood frozen in place for a few seconds. She quickly shifted from initial guilt to confident pride as she strode toward me. I advise you not to spread rumors. Whatever you say, Colin won't believe you anyway. With that, she flicked her hair confidently, left the guy she'd been flirting with behind, and headed back toward school. The guy, utterly confused, scrambled to follow. Only after they were far away did I realize my clenched fists were drenched in sweat. Should I tell Colin? Would he really not believe me? Did he truly like Luna? Lost in thought, I returned home to find Aunt Lee busy unpacking deliveries. Chloe's back. Could you help me organize these? The floor was covered in packages, cupcake liners, birthday decorations, all party supplies at a glance. Auntie, are you throwing a party? Oh, right. You didn't know? The day after tomorrow, Sunday, November 6th, is Colin's birthday. We're planning a party at home this year. The day after tomorrow? So sudden. But I haven't even prepared a birthday gift yet. After helping Auntie Lee organize everything, I went back to my room and checked my phone balance. Mom had just transferred this month's allowance. Besides lunch at school, I usually ate all my meals at home and didn't have many expenses. With this month's allowance plus what was left from last month, I had enough to buy a decent gift. I searched online for what boys like as gifts these days. After reading dozens of posts, I decided to hit the mall tomorrow instead. Luna's situation was temporarily pushed to the back of my mind. After school the next day, I headed straight to the mall. I browsed around but couldn't find anything that felt just right. Then I saw a group of high school boys coming out of a basketball store. It suddenly hit me, Colin loves playing basketball too. So I walked right into that basketball store. The moment I entered, I noticed the store was different from ordinary sports shops. The displays were upscale, and one entire wall was lined with autographed basketballs. The owner greeted me warmly as I walked in, asking what I was looking for. Excuse me, do you have any James signed basketballs? I pointed toward the wall filled with autographed balls. The owner glanced in the direction I indicated, his expression pausing briefly before he immediately resumed his friendly smile. These are all part of my collection over the years. I don't usually sell them. Young lady, are you getting this for your boyfriend? Boyfriend? No. Not really. It's for a friend who loves James. I waved my hands hurriedly to explain, my cheeks flushing slightly. The owner gave me a knowing look, carefully removing a basketball from the shelf. It was still wrapped in plastic for protection. He cradled it in his hands and held it up for me to see, explaining how James had signed it at some tournament, mentioning reissues and auctions, and throwing in a bunch of terms I didn't understand. The gist was that he'd gone to great lengths to get it. My eyes sparkled as I looked at him. Can I buy this one? I have a really important friend who absolutely loves James. The owner looked troubled, but my sincerity finally won him over. All right, 10,000. I'll part with it reluctantly. 10,000? That's so expensive. I gasped, remembering I only had a little over 8,000 in my account. I gave the basketball a regretful look and decided it wasn't worth it. Here's the deal. Since your friend and I are kindred spirits, and I admire how thoughtfully you picked this gift for him, let's call it fate. How about 9,500? But I only have 8,000. Then 8,000 it is. Consider it making a friend. Deal. And so, I happily carried that beautifully wrapped basketball home. Early the next morning, Auntie Lee and I bustled about in the kitchen preparing ingredients. We hired an event planning company to decorate the backyard. Staff busily inflated balloons, tied them, and set up frames. Within hours, a proper birthday party venue took shape. As dusk fell, I helped arrange desserts and drinks, working up a sweat. I went upstairs to shower, changed into a dress, and applied a touch of makeup. Descending the stairs, I noticed Colin's friends and classmates had already begun arriving. Oscar, who had accidentally collided with me while cycling last time, spotted me first and came over to greet me. While greeting everyone, I scanned the crowd for Colin. Just then, one of his friends asked where the birthday boy was. Oscar replied he'd gone to pick up a few friends. No sooner had he mentioned him than I heard the roar of his motorcycle engine. I dashed to the front yard, catching Luna stepping out of the passenger seat. The moment she saw me, she lifted her chin haughtily, her eyes brimming with contempt. Upon entering, she ignored me standing by the doorway and went straight to Auntie Lee to greet her. Strangely, Auntie Lee, who was usually kind to everyone, pretended not to notice Luna's confident greeting. Instead, she called me over to help arrange seating for the guests in the backyard. Luna's gaze at me was like a venomous snake's tongue, sending a chill down my spine. But it didn't end there. Auntie Lee seated Luna at the very end of the table, farthest from Colin. Luna tried several times to move closer, but Auntie Lee deliberately reminded her to return to the back. Seating arrangements shouldn't matter, but Auntie Lee pulled her to the back row twice. Anyone could see Auntie Lee disliked Luna. Why? Had Auntie Lee had some prior beef with Luna? But Luna seemed to be meeting Auntie Lee for the first time. Colin came back downstairs after changing clothes. Luna, still not giving up, immediately latched onto him to chat. Auntie Lee carried a fruit salad out on a tray. Spotting Luna standing beside Colin, she deliberately walked right between them to place the salad on the table. Young lady, why are you up front again? Go back to your seat. Dinner's almost served. With that, Auntie Lee pulled Luna back to the very end of the table. Luna shot Colin a desperate look for help. Colin, ever observant, paused for just a second before suddenly turning his gaze to me. He walked over, tapped the table lightly with his knuckle, and said, "Come with me." I clenched the hem of my skirt, tension rising instantly. I stood up and followed Colin upstairs. He stood with his back to me for a moment, as if holding something back. I stood behind him uneasily, like a child who'd done something wrong. "Chloe, could you please stop meddling in my friendships? Stop running off to my mom with all your nonsense? Luna and I are just classmates. Even if there's something between us, it's none of your business." His words were cold, yet I couldn't understand a single one. What meddling in friendships? What tattling? Had Luna caught me seeing her with another guy and now slandered me to Colin? Colin, you've misunderstood me. Did Luna say, enough? Only you know whether you did those things or not. With that, he brushed past me down the stairs, his sleeve lightly grazing my shoulder. I stood there dumbstruck, slowly processing what had just happened. My nose stung, and my eyes burned hot. I raised my hand to wipe away tears, my fingers trembling uncontrollably. The second-floor hallway was open to the living room below. Anyone passing by could see my disheveled state if they glanced up. I retreated to my room, leaning against the door before letting my sobs escape. Luna's words echoed in my mind, "Whatever you say, Colin won't believe you anyway." But why? Why would he misunderstand me like this? Did he truly see me that way? I sobbed quietly until I heard Aunt Lee calling for me downstairs. My makeup was smudged from crying, so I simply removed it. Washing my face with cold water, I took a long moment to compose myself before any trace of tears vanished. When I returned downstairs, the courtyard was still bustling. Aunt Lee spotted me and hurried over, pulling me along to cut the cake. She led me to the front of the crowd. Colin's gaze flicked over me briefly, lingering not at all. As everyone sang happy birthday, I slipped away unnoticed. Surely Colin didn't want to open his eyes after making a wish and see me there. Luna eventually sat in my original spot. Auntie Lee tried to move her, but Colin called her away. I sat silently in the back row, sipping champagne. My tongue tasted sweet, but my heart felt bitter. So I drank glass after glass, hoping the sweetness on my tongue would slowly seep into my heart. I got drunk, yet not completely. I remember falling onto the lawn, pulling a nearby balloon down with me. As I struggled, the balloon's string wrapped around my arm. Aunt Lee had Colin carry me back to my room. I think I buried my face in his neck and whispered something. What was it? "Luna likes more than just you, but I only like you." Are you kidding me? Did I really say that? I rubbed my head in frustration. Now Colin would definitely misunderstand me, thinking I was bad-mouthing Luna. And I'd already made up my mind today, since Colin always misunderstands me without a second thought. I don't want to like him like this anymore. How did I end up blurting out a confession like that? I lit up my phone screen. It was barely 2 a.m. I quietly opened the bedroom door. The living room was still bright and noisy. Peeking out, I saw Colin's friends playing cards. I glanced toward Colin's room and saw light seeping through the crack beneath his door. Just as I was debating whether to go explain myself to Colin, I suddenly heard my name faintly. "You really don't like Chloe? Then why do you care so much about her?" It was Oscar's voice. "Don't think I don't know. After Chloe left school, you've been glued to your phone watching the security feed of your house. You only feel at ease doing your experiments once you see her get home. She's sickly, and my mom insists I look out for her. It's so annoying. I'm here to study, not be her nurse. I really can't stand her." The disgust in his voice lashed at me through the door, making my legs go weak as I stumbled back. I slipped quietly back into my room. The moment I closed the door, tears spilled over. My eyes fell on the exquisitely wrapped basketball sitting on the desk, the birthday gift I hadn't managed to give him. He finds me so annoying, he'd probably even be annoyed by my gift. Crying, I dragged the suitcase from under the bed and frantically started stuffing things inside. Halfway through packing, my head grew heavy, and I collapsed onto the bed, falling asleep. All night, I drifted in and out of sleep. Sometimes it was Colin telling me not to meddle in his friendships. Other times, it was Colin and Oscar saying I annoyed him. I woke up around 5 a.m., before dawn. I packed a little more, washed up, and packed away my toiletries. Aunt Lee must have stayed up late last night too, so she probably wouldn't be up this early. I made a simple breakfast for myself. Sitting at my usual spot at the dining table, I ate while staring blankly at Colin's empty seat. Hearing footsteps coming downstairs, I thought it was Aunt Lee. But when I turned around, it was Colin. He stood at the top of the stairs, his gaze on me felt unusually deep. Suddenly remembering last night's drunken confession, I didn't greet him as usual. Instead, I avoided him with a hint of evasion, turning back to my breakfast. He'd come down to get water and glanced at the bulging travel bag stuffed beside my seat. Going on a trip? No, perhaps sensing my coldness, he didn't press the issue. He silently leaned against the fridge and drank his water. Did he not actually hear my confession? Don't drunk people usually slur their words? My breakfast, which had tasted decent, suddenly lost all flavor. My appetite vanished. After cleaning up, Colin was still leaning against the fridge. "I'm putting the milk away." He moved aside. I placed the milk in the fridge, grabbed my bag, and started to leave. Going to school so early? Wait for Oscar to wake up, and we can go together. An inexplicable irritation flared within me. Had he forgotten what he'd said to me last night? For the first time, I shot back with the most sarcastic tone I could muster. No need to bother yourself anymore, Colin. With that, I swiftly changed my shoes and headed out, hailing a cab to school. I applied for on-campus housing, and luckily there was an available room. I immediately started the application process. It's less than 2 months until break. Why not wait until next semester? It doesn't matter if I move in this semester or next. Please ask the teacher to expedite my application. Since I bought Colin a gift, I didn't have enough money left for the fee. After much deliberation, I called my dad. I organized my thoughts, fearing he might refuse, and even rehearsed how to persuade him. But unexpectedly, when Dad heard my sudden request for dorm housing, he only paused briefly before agreeing. What about Mom? Leave her to me. Your parents just want you happy and safe. I'll transfer the money right now. Not long after hanging up, I got the transfer notification. After paying the fees, the school emailed before classes ended that my dorm was arranged and shared my roommate's contact info. Her name was Ada. We synced schedules and agreed I'd drop off a bag of luggage later. That evening, I returned to the Zhong household as usual. After dinner, I washed dishes while Aunt Lee sliced fruit nearby. During this time, I told Auntie Lee about moving into the school dorm. She was shocked and immediately asked if I was unhappy somewhere or if Colin was bullying me. She kept urging me to stay, saying even if I wanted to live on campus, I should wait until next year. Fortunately, I had my response prepared. Living on campus would be more convenient for classes and studying, and since I'm introverted, living with classmates would help me make friends. When I mentioned my parents had already agreed to the move, Auntie Lee knew her pleas were futile. She offered to help me pack upstairs, only to find everything already neatly gathered. Chloe, tell Auntie, is Colin really bullying you? Auntie, honestly, no. It's just, I want to experience dorm life. Auntie sighed, gently taking my hand and stroking it. Don't think I don't know. You've been coming home alone lately. Last time, I saw you get off the bus at the community gate, yet you told me Colin dropped you off at the door. I know. Colin always complains I'm too controlling. Maybe that's why he took it out on you. Don't blame him. My eyes stung again. I turned my hand to hold Auntie Lee's and reassured her, Auntie, don't overthink it. My parents kept a tight leash on me growing up. Now that I'm in college, it's time to experience dorm life. It'll help me when I enter society later. Then make sure to come home for meals on weekends when you have breaks. Auntie Lee gave me a long list of reminders. Colin was busy preparing for the tech competition and didn't return until late that night. The next day, he had no classes and took the day off. Auntie Lee drove me and my luggage back to campus. Even as I left the Zhong residence for the last time, I never said goodbye to him. A month passed in the blink of an eye. Though it took some getting used to at first, with my roommate's help, I settled into dorm life quite well. At first, I deliberately avoided paths near Colin's department, but later it became irrelevant. I didn't think about him often anymore. Every Friday, Auntie Lee would message me inviting me to dinner at the Zhong residence, but I kept declining with various excuses. This particular Friday, I was in class when Auntie Lee messaged again, asking me to come home for dinner. I typed and deleted in the chat box, unsure what excuse to use. Truthfully, I was busy tonight. Ada had dragged me into her club, and tonight happened to be the painting club dinner. But I'd used that excuse before, and repeating it now felt a bit phony. Just then, the teacher called on me to answer a question, and I completely forgot to reply. After a full afternoon of classes, dusk had spread across half the sky when I stepped outside. As soon as I exited the building, I spotted Colin sitting on a bench by the road. Hey, Chloe, is Colin your brother? A classmate asked, shaking my arm slightly excitedly. They all still thought Colin was my brother. He's not my brother, I replied with a polite smile, intending to follow the crowd away. But Colin called out to me. He suggested finding a place outside to sit. I fidgeted uncomfortably with my bag strap, wanting to refuse. But he didn't give me a chance to refuse. He turned and walked away, pausing after a few steps to see if I was following. With no other choice, I followed him to a cafe outside the school. Maybe it was because we hadn't seen each other in a while, but his attitude wasn't as sharp as before. There was even a hint of flattery. My mom said you didn't reply to her message. She asked me to find you and bring you home for dinner. Is that all this is about? Sorry, I have plans tonight. Another time. I'll tell Auntie myself later. He cradled his water glass, turning it slowly in his hands for a long while before setting it gently on the table. After hesitating for a moment, he suddenly apologized to me. Yes, apologized. Seeing my puzzled expression, he finally explained the whole misunderstanding. It all started the day he and Luna came to visit me in the hospital. After they left that evening, Colin got a call from Auntie Lee. She told him never to bring Luna to the hospital to see me again and to cut off contact with Luna altogether. Colin assumed I'd said something bad to Auntie Lee. He resented this control so much that his attitude toward me turned nasty too. But how did Auntie Lee know you brought Luna to see me? Seeing I truly had no clue, he sighed with a headache. Didn't you know your ward has surveillance monitoring family visits? I genuinely didn't know. That day, my mom wanted to check if I brought you soup, so she pulled up the surveillance footage. She just happened to hear what Luna said to you. If I hadn't argued with her last night and she showed me the recording, I'd never have known. So that was it. That was why he'd misunderstood me. So that's why you suddenly got angry with me, thinking I was that kind of person. Colin's expression grew even more apologetic as he lowered his head, his thick lashes casting shadows beneath his eyes. About Luna. I've always known what she's like. I deliberately didn't keep my distance just to show my rebellion in front of my mom, so, thinking back to myself a month ago, I still desperately wanted to explain to Colin, but I didn't know where to start. But now that the misunderstanding is cleared up, I'm not exactly happy. At most, I feel relieved that the weight of that false accusation has been lifted off my shoulders. I misunderstood you and spoke to you like that. I'm sorry. It's okay. Of course it matters, my damn knee-jerk reaction. Maybe the cafe's heating was too high, but my chest felt tight and stuffy. I didn't want to stay. Just as I was wondering how to leave, I ran into Ada. Hey Chloe, having drinks with your brother. Ada greeted me warmly. He's not my brother. Oh right, aren't we having dinner tonight? I'll join you guys. I hurriedly grabbed my bag and told Colin, I'm heading out. Ada gave me a once-over. You're going like that? Tonight's the photography club mixer, lots of hot guys. Mixer? Wasn't it just dinner? How did it turn into a mixer? Feeling inexplicably guilty, I glanced at Colin and tugged Ada's arm, trying to pull her out of the cafe. My mom's waiting for you to come home for dinner, Colin called after me. Chloe's brother can come home for dinner anytime, but mixers don't happen every day. Ada teased. I'm not her brother. He's not my brother. I'm naturally socially anxious. Ada practically dragged me into joining clubs. Mixers like this just aren't my scene. After leaving the cafe, I tried to find another excuse to back out, but Ada wouldn't have it. She insisted on taking me back to the dorm to change clothes. The painting club has mostly girls, while the photography club has mostly guys. Mixing them together balances things out. Ada pulled me to sit beside her, patting my shoulder boldly. See someone you like? I'll help you get them. I nudged her gently with my elbow. Cut it out. Let's head back early. Out of the corner of my eye, I spotted the beer nearby. I first asked the waiter for orange juice, making it clear I didn't drink alcohol. But when we started playing games later, everyone refused to let me drink orange juice for the forfeits. After Ada covered for me twice, I felt too embarrassed to let her take the third one. Just as I picked up the glass, a hand snatched it away. I looked up to see Jacob, sitting diagonally across from me, one of the photography club members. The moment he snatched the glass from my hand, the whole group started cheering, embarrassing me to the point my face flushed red. Tonight wasn't exactly my lucky night. Before long, I lost again. Fearing a repeat of the earlier commotion, I quickly downed the drink in one gulp. When I lost again later, that Jacob tried to grab my glass again, so I quickly downed it in one gulp. Ada leaned over to my ear, speechless. Girl, give others a chance to shine. Later, seeing I'd had quite a bit to drink, everyone started letting me win. But by the time we left the restaurant, the alcohol was kicking in. Every step felt like walking on cotton, and the cold wind made me feel dizzy. Ada supported half my weight, but being half a head taller than her, we nearly toppled over. Just then, Jacob approached again, tugging my arm. You're heading back to campus, right? I'll walk you. His touch felt unnerving. As I tried to pull away, another large hand seized Jacob's wrist and flung him aside. Next, someone hooked their knee under mine and lifted me into a princess carry. It was Colin. He told Ada, she's staying at my place tonight. Be careful getting back to school. His tone carried a hint of irritation, leaving Ada flustered as she agreed. I stared blankly at the suddenly appearing Colin until he placed me in the passenger seat, buckled me in, and I slowly came to my senses. I struggled to unbuckle the seatbelt, wanting to return to school with Ada and the others. He pressed down on my hand, trying to release the buckle. Don't move. I turned my head, only for my nose to brush lightly against his chin. We both startled and jerked back. He closed his door first, walked around to the other side, got in, started the engine, and sped off. Thus, in a daze, I followed him back to the Zhong residence. At the entrance, seeing me standing there blankly, he opened the shoe cabinet and retrieved the slippers I'd worn before. Change your shoes. What are you spacing out for? He tossed the car keys onto the entryway cabinet and turned toward the kitchen. After changing my shoes, I stood in the living room, feeling somewhat at a loss. It had only been a little over a month since I'd been here, yet it felt both unfamiliar and strangely familiar. Colin emerged from the kitchen holding a glass of water. Seeing me standing there in a daze, he pressed the glass into my hand and snapped his fingers in front of my face. Snap out of it. You can't drink, so don't pretend to be drinking. I took a sip from the glass. It was warm and sweet, honey water. Colin tugged my shoulder and guided me to the sofa. I sipped the honey water slowly as my thoughts gradually returned. After watching me finish the glass, he turned to lead me upstairs to rest. Why were you there tonight? The figure walking ahead paused briefly before resuming the climb. Just passing by. My room remained unchanged since I'd left. I'd expected Colin to rush to convert it back into a gaming setup. Colin glanced at me, reeking of alcohol, though my clothes were nowhere to be found. Mom's already asleep. Want me to grab you a set of mine? No need. I'll just freshen up. I'll wash the sheets and covers tomorrow after I wake up. Perhaps thinking I'd misunderstood him, a flicker of anxiety crossed his face. He quickly clarified, I didn't mean it like that. I just worry you won't be comfortable sleeping like this. The alcohol numbed my jumbled thoughts, and combined with the day's exhaustion, I fell asleep the moment my head hit the pillow, sleeping soundly until dawn. It was Sunday, so I didn't have to rush back to school for classes. I took the sheets and pillowcases off and headed to the laundry room to wash them. After setting the washing machine and stepping out, I happened to run into Colin coming from his room. He heard the sound of the washing machine running inside the laundry room and seemed inexplicably unhappy. Are you heading back to school? No classes today. Why not stay for lunch? Auntie Lee invited me to stay for lunch. I'll head back after eating. As I turned to go downstairs, Colin called out to me again. Chloe, are you still upset? My eyes dropped to the floor. Suddenly, I remembered overhearing Colin and Oscar talking in this very hallway that day, and my eyes stung again. Seeing I didn't answer, he stepped around from behind to face me. His expression flustered when he saw my reddened eyes. Don't cry. Colin. I hesitated for a long moment before finally telling him. Actually, that day. I heard what you said to Oscar. Tears finally fell, one by one, hitting the floor. I wiped my tears. Don't misunderstand, I didn't mean to eavesdrop. Caught off guard, he looked flustered and embarrassed. Back then. I was still misunderstanding you, he explained. Chloe, I'm truly sorry. I jumped to conclusions and kept misjudging you, saying all those hurtful things. I hummed in acknowledgement. After getting it off my chest, I suddenly felt a wave of relief wash over me. I smiled at him. Let's go downstairs for breakfast. I walked past him toward the stairs, hearing his footsteps follow only as I neared the bottom. Aunt Lee was delighted to see me back. She chattered about my drinking the night before while scooping me a bowl of congee. This congee is gentle on the stomach. You should have some after drinking. Thank goodness Colin ran into you last night. You university kids drinking so late, it's dangerous. Never do that again. Aunt Lee sat across from me, serving side dishes while lecturing. I held my full bowl, cooing sweetly at her that I wouldn't do it again. Auntie Lee always fell for that act of mine. Colin, sitting beside her, stared at me in a daze. I caught his gaze and looked back at him. His eyes darted away like a startled rabbit. The morning passed quickly. After lunch, I took the freshly dried sheets out and made the bed. Once I finished, I noticed Colin standing at my door. "Are you leaving already?" "Yeah." "Then I'll walk you out." I looked at him, puzzled, and asked with a hint of mischief, "But you used to hate picking me up and dropping me off." He replied with unexpected seriousness, "Chloe, I don't actually mind you." Seeing him like that, I felt an inexplicable urge to laugh. I chuckled quietly as I turned to grab my things, then composed myself and said flatly, "Well, thanks then." He beamed like he'd won a prize, happily agreeing before dashing downstairs to turn on the car heater. On weekends, Aunt Lee still invited me to the Zhongs for dinner. When my classes ran late, Colin would wait for me downstairs as if afraid I'd slip away, no longer waiting in the car like before. Gradually, weekend dinners at the Zhongs became routine. Every Friday, Colin would wait to walk me home. Later, Aunt Lee suggested I just stay at the Zhongs over the weekend since it was already a break. But I still felt a bit resistant to the idea of staying at their place. As Aunt Lee brought it up, I chewed on my chopsticks, trying to figure out how to refuse. Colin chimed in, "Exactly. We can go to school together on Monday, and I won't have to drive you again." I'd rather not," I murmured. Auntie Lee looked disappointed, while Colin stared blankly ahead, poking at his rice with a cold expression. That evening, Colin drove me back to school. He was sullen the whole way, and I dared not speak. "Why won't you stay at my place?" "Huh? Did he actually want me to stay?" "Chloe." He called my name once, then fell silent again. The car grew quiet, filled only by the wind outside. I glanced at him in confusion. His Adam's apple bobbed once, but in the end, he said nothing. Ever since that day, the atmosphere between Colin and me seemed to have shifted into something strange. It felt like something had changed, yet nothing had changed. Colin started messaging me proactively, asking what I wanted to eat on weekends so Auntie Lee could prepare it, or reminding me to bundle up as the weather turned colder. Deep down, I suspected these were things Colin wanted to ask or say himself, and Auntie Lee was just an excuse. After all, Auntie Lee could contact me directly and tell me herself. A vague thought stirred in my mind, but it seemed unlikely. Before I could dwell on it, another worry pulled me in. Jacob from the photography club had latched onto me. Ever since the mixer, he kept showing up at our department, trying to ask me out. "Jacob, I really don't have time." I wanted him to stop pursuing me, but he seemed oblivious to subtle hints, and I couldn't bring myself to be blunt. "Not today? How about tomorrow? Why don't you add me on social media first?" He trailed behind me, persistent. I'd actually received his friend request ages ago and deliberately ignored it. I quickened my pace, hoping to shake him off by hurrying back to the dorm. But when he saw me speeding up, he grabbed my wrist. "What are you doing?" I yanked my arm free, my voice tinged with panic. Passing students all turned to stare. Embarrassed, Jacob lashed out with a nasty remark, "What's with the fake high and mighty act? You're just the one who got drunk on purpose to seduce Colin." A few people had already noticed us, but hearing Colin's name drew even more stares. My eyes widened as anger and humiliation surged through me. What the hell are you talking about?" Did I say anything wrong? Before he could finish, someone grabbed the back of his head and forced him into a perfect 90-degree bow. Jacob struggled angrily to break free, ready to lash out, only to see Colin standing behind him. "Apologize." Colin's voice was icy, his gaze terrifying. Jacob tried to walk away, but Colin grabbed him by the collar from behind, hoisting him up like a little chick. Sorry." Jacob gritted out an apology. Colin seemed unsatisfied, and fearing he might lash out, I quickly stepped forward and tugged his arm. All right. Forget it." Jacob was released and fled in disgrace under the crowd's scornful stares. Colin took my hand and led me away from the crowd. I stared blankly at his hand holding mine, following him along in a daze. He led me to the parking lot, opened the passenger door, and motioned for me to get in. Then he climbed in himself, his chest rising and falling slightly as he turned on the car's heater. "Where are we going?" "Chloe." "Huh? I like you." A long silence fell inside the car. In the quiet, I could almost hear my own heartbeat. Seeing I hadn't spoken for so long, he called my name again. I kept my head down, my fingers twisting together restlessly, just like my heart, a tangled mess. It wasn't that I hadn't considered this possibility lately, but... Colin, maybe you don't like me. You're just being extra considerate because you feel guilty about misunderstanding me before. That's remorse, not affection. I spoke calmly. After about half a minute, the car remained silent. The heater made me feel stuffy, so I unlocked the door and got out. After that day, I started making excuses to avoid going to the Zhong residence again. Colin never came downstairs to wait for me either. Sometimes, when I didn't see him sitting on the bench, I felt a slight pang of disappointment. School was on break. While packing my luggage in the dorm, I got a call from Aunt Lee, asking me to have dinner at the Zhong family home before heading back. My flight was at 3 p.m. I'd have time to eat and get to the airport, so I agreed. Carrying my luggage downstairs, I walked toward the campus exit while hailing a ride on my phone. Suddenly, my left hand went empty, the suitcase handle slipped from my grasp. I looked up to see Colin striding ahead, pulling my luggage behind him. I hurried to catch up, arriving at the parking lot. Without a word, he hoisted the suitcase onto the trunk, then motioned for me to get in. This was our first meeting since I'd rejected him last time. He'd reverted to the cold, distant Colin from months ago. West City winters were bitterly cold, and fearing illness, I bundled myself up like a dumpling. The car's heater was blasting, and soon a thin sheen of sweat formed on my forehead. Fortunately, the distance wasn't far. After Colin parked, I couldn't wait to get out for some fresh air. The door was locked. After unlocking it, it clicked shut again. Confused, I looked at Colin. He pulled out a few tissues from the holder beside him and reached over to gently wipe the sweat from my forehead. You're sweating. Getting windy outside could make you sick. My heart began pounding wildly again. His hand accidentally brushed my earlobe, and I flinched away. I took the tissues from him and roughly wiped my sweat. Auntie Lee had prepared a feast, and even Uncle Zhong, who usually didn't come home for lunch, returned today. Throughout the meal, Colin barely spoke, yet I could feel his frequent glances in my direction. After chatting with Auntie Lee for a while, it was time for me to head to the airport. Colin drove me again. The entire ride was silent. I stared blankly out the window at the scenery rushing past. When the car pulled smoothly into the airport parking lot, he got out and helped me retrieve my suitcase from the trunk. As I took it from him, he held on tightly, refusing to let go. I looked up at him and saw his eyes had grown deep, a faint darkness in their depths. Chloe, do you really not like me anymore? I froze, remembering that drunken confession on his birthday. That was just me talking nonsense when I was drunk. His hand, which had been resting on the suitcase handle, moved to my wrist and clasped it tightly. I've thought about this a lot lately, trying to pinpoint when exactly I started caring about you. It wasn't the guilt that came after realizing I'd misunderstood you. It was before that, after deliberately distancing myself and ignoring you, yet still secretly watching your mood, wondering if I'd been too harsh. I knew you cried that day. I regretted it immediately, but I couldn't bring myself to go find you. So I had my mom call you instead. What you overheard me saying to Oscar? That was just me putting up a front because he'd hit a nerve. I admit, at first I resented having a stranger suddenly in my home, disrupting my routine and schedule. But when I noticed your toothbrush gone from the sink, your seat empty at the table, and found myself alone during breaks and after class, I felt this indescribable sense of loss and emptiness. After I found out you went to that mixer, I was on pins and needles all night. I had someone find out where you were. When I got there, I saw that jerk Jacob trying to put his arm around you. If you hadn't been so drunk you could barely stand, I would have punched him that night. He poured out a flood of words, so much information at once. I opened my mouth, unsure what to say, just feeling like crying. So I just pouted, remembering all the past grievances, and my eyes instantly reddened. My teeth gently bit my lower lip as I cried silently. Seeing me cry, Colin also panicked a bit. He fumbled around for a moment, then finally cupped my face gently with both hands, pressing his thumbs against my jaw to gently release my lower lip. "Don't bite yourself," he said softly. My sobs grew louder, and he pulled me into his arms, wrapping me in his coat. "You're such a clueless fool who misunderstands everything." I am. I hate how you're always so hot and cold." I'll change. I cried in his embrace for a long while until my phone buzzed with a security check reminder and I finally pulled away. He walked me through baggage check-in and escorted me to the security gate. Just as I was about to enter, he grabbed my hand. "Chloe, you still haven't answered me." After stammering for a while, I blurted out, "Depends on how you behave," and slipped through the security gate. After that day, Colin and I started chatting more frequently. From morning till night, it seemed we had endless topics to discuss. Even Mom couldn't help but ask if I had a boyfriend, staring at my phone and smiling nonstop. I lied and said I'd come across some funny news. On Christmas Eve, I curled up in bed talking to Colin on the phone. After chatting for a while, his voice grew hoarse. "Chloe, I miss you so much." I fell silent for a long moment, listening to his breathing through the receiver, before softly replying, "I miss you too." The next morning, my phone's ringtone jolted me awake. The caller ID showed Colin. After answering, he asked where I lived. When I told him, he paused for a few seconds before saying he'd be there in 30 minutes. Be there? Where? I hurriedly checked my messages and found he'd sent me a string of texts saying he'd taken a flight arriving in the city around 6 a.m., but I'd been asleep and missed them. I scrambled out of bed, washed up, frantically packed my things, and ran to the entrance of my complex to wait for him. Just as I stepped outside, I saw a yellow taxi pull up smoothly to the curb. Colin got out. He really came. I stood there breathless. When he spotted me, he quickened his pace toward me, then broke into a run. Suddenly, a phrase came to mind: when you go to meet someone you love, of course you run. The next moment, he pulled me tightly into his embrace. "Why did you come?" "It's Christmas today, you know." My voice buzzed as I buried my face in his chest. "Because you said you missed me, so I came." He held me for a long time. I was just about to suggest we sit somewhere nearby, afraid of running into my parents. But what I feared most happened. Next, I heard my mom calling my name, "Chloe." Turning around, I saw my parents standing not far away, bags in hand, watching us. I bounced out of Colin's arms like a rabbit, standing sheepishly to the side with my head down. Colin was the first to react, stepping forward to greet my parents. My mom looked surprised to see Colin. Her eyes darted between me and him before she laughed, grabbing Colin's arm and pulling him toward our house. But my dad called out to her, "Take Chloe home first. Colin and I need to run an errand." He shot Colin a look, and Colin obediently followed my dad away. Mom dragged me aside for a gossip session, asking about Colin and me. I gave vague answers, my mind fixated on my dad's expression when he saw Colin earlier. He didn't seem to like him, and I felt uneasy. I paced restlessly at home for ages before finally hearing the door open. I dashed to the entrance hall to find Colin returning with my dad. I shot Colin a questioning look, and he gave me an okay sign to reassure me. I later learned Dad had long noticed my feelings for Colin. But back then, Colin was still in his rejection phase toward me, even publicly embarrassing me at the dinner table. When I later asked to move out of the Zhong household to live on campus, Dad guessed trouble had arisen between Colin and me, which is why he supported my move. He called Colin aside to get clarity on his intentions. He must have gotten a satisfactory answer, because he brought Colin home with him. After dinner at my place, Colin stayed for the afternoon before flying back to West City that evening. That's how Colin and I officially became a couple, starting our short-lived long-distance relationship. When the new semester began, he picked me up at the airport and took me back to the Zhong residence for dinner. Aunt Lee was overjoyed to learn I was with Colin. She practically called me her daughter-in-law. Still, I chose to live on campus this semester. Colin reluctantly drove me there, clutching my hand and acting all cute the whole way. After his persistent coaxing, I finally agreed to spend one weekend night at the Zhong residence. While packing in my dorm, I stumbled upon the birthday gift I'd bought for Colin last year. I'd thought it was lost forever. On Friday, Colin had lab work in the afternoon, so I took a taxi to the Zhong residence with the gift myself. When he returned that evening, I knocked on his door with the present in hand. The moment he opened it, he tried to pull me into his arms, only to be blocked by the large box I was holding. "What's this?" I handed him the box. "Tada. Your birthday present from last year." Colin froze, a flash of guilt crossing his eyes. He took the box, lifted the lid, paused, then looked up at a spot on his wall with a complicated expression. I followed his gaze. On the wall shelf sat another basketball, also signed by James. Startled, I walked over to the shelf, examined it closely, and pointed at the basketball. How come you have a James signed basketball too? Colin stiffens slightly. Mine's fake. Where'd you get this one? Mentioning this, I excitedly recounted how I'd hit it off with the sporting goods store owner and how much persuasion it took to get this basketball. But, some time later, I learned that sporting goods store had been reported and shut down by market regulators. Colin's uncle was an agent for a star team in Los Angeles. That autographed basketball in Colin's room? His uncle had given it to him. I buried my face in Colin's chest, heartbroken over my 8,000 yuan. Colin pinched my cheek, teasing me as a silly girl, then promptly transferred 80,000 yuan to my account. After Colin graduated from college, he took me along to their alumni reunion. Luna was there too. She watched coldly as Colin wrapped his arm around me, then resorted to her old tricks, approaching me with a feigned smile. Chloe, the guys are sitting over there. Us girls will sit over here. After I started dating Colin, Luna and he were assigned to the same group, so daily interactions were unavoidable. Even though I never asked for it, Colin reported everything to me, down to Luna accidentally brushing his arm. He'd come to me with a complaint. He never skimped on compliments either, helping me, who used to be socially anxious and felt ordinary, start to see some sparkles in myself. In short, I now felt confident in both myself and Colin. So I readily agreed to follow Luna to our seats. But Colin clung to me, refusing to let go. No. I want to stay with you. Everyone nearby started teasing us, wearing expressions of pure envy. Luna joked, Chloe, you wouldn't be afraid we'd pick on you, would you? That's why Colin won't let you go. Just as I was about to retort, Colin piped up first, his tone tinged with a hint of threat. Haven't you ever picked on me? Luna's face darkened, her lips twisting into an awkward smile. In the end, Colin led me over to the boys' table. Midway through dinner, Luna and a few other girls approached with juice. As if the earlier incident never happened, Luna gracefully invited everyone to her birthday party next week. Colin, you and Chloe should come too. Colin paused, then asked, what day next week? Luna's face lit up with excitement. Wednesday night at Bernie's Garden Restaurant. Colin pulled out his phone and checked his calendar. Sorry, that's a busy day, we're booked for our wedding. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more romantic stories.